Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting of the Open Space Advisory Committee to order. It's December 16th, 5:30 p.m., and we appreciate the fact that we have a nice audience tonight, so thank you for coming out. First, we have a roll call.
Chairperson Scott,
Here?
Vice Chair Welch. Sorry, Trustee Evans. Here. Whoops. Member Evans, excuse me.
I'm still here.
Perfect. Member Hall. Here. Member Inverson. Here. Member Masad. Here. Member Michael. Here. A quorum is present.
Thank you. Are there any public comments at this time with regard to items which are not part of our agenda? Yes, Jennifer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jennifer Budge, Parks and Recreation Director. I just wanted to take a moment to make a couple introductions. We have some new staff here supporting our efforts, and I just wanted to make sure that we know who everyone is. I'd like to introduce Danielle Howard. She's our new deputy clerk, and Tamar Warren will be covering some of the other boards. She was promoted, so just wanted to thank and introduce Danielle. And then I'm going to try not to ruin Mahela's last name, Mahela Niagos, and she's our deputy district attorney.
A pleasure to meet you all.
Thank you, and welcome to both of you. And don't ever view leaving this committee as a promotion. Okay, are there any modifications to the agenda?
No modifications, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Meeting items, item 3A, this is a discussion item regarding the 90% design plans for trail construction on the Carson River Trail System Phase 2 project. Preliminary plans Part 1, preliminary plans Part 2, preliminary plans Part 3, preliminary plans Part 4, and many of us have been across the on the other side of the building and seen some of this the displays, so many of you already have a feel for what is being shown. But with that, I would ask Ann or Greg, who is going to make the staff presentation?
Mr. Chair, I think we skipped an item, action on approval of minutes.
Okay, excuse me. All right, we have the minutes, and I must not have printed those because I don't have them with me. So, what's the,
I have an extra set.
was that a late material? I see, excuse me. Late material, draft minutes of the meeting of the Carson City Open Space Advisory Committee, Monday, October 21st, 2019. It looks like the entire committee was here, and we have a set of minutes which were passed out tonight. Do we have any comments, questions, anything from staff at this point?
No changes, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Committee members, any particular, any comments? Obviously, we haven't had a chance to look at these. Do you want to take these under advisement and review them for next time? Do you want to go ahead and glance at them, come back to them later in the meeting? Do you have a preference?
Review for next time.
Okay. Is that okay with the committee? Yes. Review for next time? Yes. Is that okay? All right, let's make sure we don't forget to put that as an agenda item. And
So pursuant to the open meeting law, my understanding is that the meetings have to be approved either 45 days from the meeting or at the following meeting, unless there is good cause.
Okay,
We could just glance through and approve it
So-
by the end of the meeting.
If you could take a moment and maybe trail this item
okay.
and discuss it at the
All
end.
right, we'll table the, excuse me, the item, come back later on in the meeting. And Mahale, you don't have to stand up.
I do have one extra set here.
We're good. I think we're good.
That'll help.
I think the committee
Okay.
all has a set. Okay, my oversight. Next, item 3A. Ann, is that you or Greg, or who's going to start?
I will, Mr. Chair. For the record, Ann Bollinger, Open Space Administrator. The first item to discuss this evening and to solicit your feedback is the 90% design plans for our trail segments funded by the Southern Nevada Public Land Management Act. From the staff perspective, this is really amazing. It's been a long time coming. It's just, as the master plans in the city, it just takes time, takes money, and so we're making significant progress. These trails conceptually were first identified in 1996 in the Carson River Master Plan, when it talked about recreation along the river, but still protecting the river, protecting the floodplain, protecting the river banks, providing suggestions on distances from the floodplain, protecting wildlife habitat. And then throughout the next couple of years, and just prior to this, for our open house, I provided some of the background material as well. Back in 2001, with the BLM, we had an amazing complex land exchange to purchase more than 61 acres along the east side of the Prison Hill Recreation Area, which otherwise would have been developed. Some of you may know back then there were actually road graders coming in to blade that ground, so we could have had a series of houses over there. Carson City acted quickly. We purchased the land, traded with BLM, and then got it back again with the Landsville in 2015. And then in 2006, our Unified Pathways Master Plan identified these trails. We had the Silver Saddle Ranch Charrette that envisioned a trail circling Prison Hill. So just document after document planning effort, and it's so exciting to be where we are today. Then jumping ahead a few years, in 2015, we had a couple members of the Open Space Advisory Committee and Parks and Recreation Commission that helped us brainstorm on ideas for silver projects around the city. And then we decided to group those projects together, which made a strong nomination to the Southern Nevada Public Land Management Act. And we were awarded $1.8 million, or actually even a little bit more for these trail projects. Very impressive. Then late last year, early this year, we had a competitive bidding process to select a design consultant. Loomis and Associates was selected. One of their subconsultants happens just to be RCI and Joanne Michael. If there's questions on some of the wetland delineation, botanical survey, she can help answer those questions. Other members of the team, of course, we have Greg Bergman, our Trails Coordinator. He's been working in the field alongside Chaz. We have Rob Fellows, our Floodplain Manager. He is also our Project Manager on this. And Lindsay Boyer, she has helped with some of the avian surveys along the river. I did skip one part of the history. When we brought this proposal in front of both committees, there were concerns significantly along the river segment. Do we need another trail along the river? And if you can recall, I talked about the process with the SNPLMA grant, that they provide us the opportunity of primary deliverables and secondary deliverables. And so what I wrote in that grant is the trail along the river will be a secondary deliverable based on the outcome of environmental surveys. So we have listened, we've conducted those surveys, and if there are questions on the results, we have professionals here who can answer those questions. But in general, the results are we're minimizing any impacts. It is the floodplain. I will be honest, we are in the floodplain, but we are minimizing other impacts to that river corridor. With that, Mr. Chair, maybe I'll introduce Chaz McQuarrie, and he can walk us through the trail segments.
Hi, Chaz, welcome.
Hello, Mr. Chair. For the record, my name is Chaz McQuarrie with Loomis Associates, and I am the project manager for Loomis on the actual design of the trails, working with the city staff that Anne had just mentioned. I think I like working collaboratively with the entities that I design trails for, and we've designed an awful lot of them. And I really enjoyed working with the open space staff and Public Works on this one. So let me say that right up front. So I think most people have been in the other room and seen the overall picture. We have three segments, we're calling them. Segment A is the Prison Hill Trail, which goes from the existing dirt parking area that you just improved at just south of Fifth Street on Carson River Road. It essentially parallels, but not exactly because of the terrain, Carson River Road heading south all the way to the entrance to Silver Saddle Ranch. It goes a little further along at that point, south side of of Carson River Road, and there's a connection across Carson River Road to the existing Mexican Ditch Trail, and then it goes just into Silver Saddle Ranch, where it'll connect to existing dirt roads, but in the future, that will be the connection to the Mexican Ditch Extension Trail, which will continue along at that point, west side of the Mexican Ditch into the Silver Saddle Ranch buildings. So segment A is the Prison Hill one, which you can see up there. That's the north part of Prison Hill, or that trail segment. And it will connect, as I just mentioned, to the Mexican Ditch Extension, which is segment C. And the reason we chose the particular cutoff between A and C is that if A gets built, but we can't build C because of lack of funds, there's not sufficient funds to build all three segments, then at that point, you'll be inside the sort of fence to Silver Saddle Ranch, and you'll be on the low-use existing roads for a little bit, and then on the exit road that'll get you to the actual ranch buildings. So there would be some way for the public to continue on dirt roads. So that's segment A and segment C. Segment B is what we call the West Riverbank Trail, and that is along the west side of the Carson River, starting at Carson River Road on the south end, where there'll be a crossing across Carson River Road to connect to Carson River Park. And that crossing will have a pedestrian-activated flashing beacon for safety. And so there'll be advanced warning signs on either side of the crossing. There'll be the flashing beacons, the sort you see on Carson Street, that are pedestrian-activated right at the crossing. And then it'll head north on the west side of the river. For much of the alignment, it is outside the pasture, but there are certain places where, either because of proximity to the river or some other constraints, we want to go into the pasture. So where the trail goes into the existing pasture, the fence will be realigned, so there'll still be a fence between the trail and the pasture land itself to keep separation from the cattle and the trail users. And it heads north, as I said, partly, occasionally in the pasture, but mostly not in the pasture. As we get further north, just south of Riverview Park, there are some private parcels that extend across the river from the east side. And we are moderately close to those because of some constraints. And while the plans at this point don't show fencing those parcels, I think maybe that's a possibility if there's a concern from the property owners. After that point, we just head north to cross the pretty substantial ditch, which is on the southern end of Riverview Park. And we'll have a big culvert there, a 6-foot culvert, and the trail will go over that and connect to the trail system in Riverview Park, which is at the southwest corner of Riverview Park, pretty close to where the well houses are right now. That was a very quick run through because I think most of you are familiar with the trails and what's proposed, but I'm more than happy to answer questions about any specifics.
Any questions from the committee? Yes, Donna.
All right, so there'll be a flashing crossing light at Carson River Park to the new trail, which is along the river. And the new trail along the river is going to be a single-use path, it's a single trail.
Well, it's 12 feet wide, so it's a wide trail. It'll be very similar in character to the existing trails in Riverview Park. So it's wide, it's a sort of standard width, it's a multi-use trail. And it's designed to AASHTO bicycle trail standards, they all are, but they're not hard surface like you might have on the, linear ditch trail, for example. It's soft surface, it has 3 inches of DG over 6 inches of aggregate base. So it has a structural section that is fairly tough, actually. So it should withstand service vehicles, for example. Pickup trucks are going to be using it for maintenance. And traffic, even when it gets a little damp. If it gets really soggy, obviously there's some impact from bicycles or horses, and potentially pedestrians too. But it's structurally designed so that it has quite some integrity. It's not just sort of dirt. It won't turn into mud right away.
And also the section C, you're going to discuss that later?
No, sorry, I sort of tagged that onto A. So A, the southern end of A is across from the Mexican end of the Mexican Ditch Trail right now, where there's another crossing of Carson River Road with a pedestrian-activated flashing beacon. And the A extends just a little bit into Silver Saddle Ranch. And then that's the end of segment A, and segment C continues along the west side of the Mexican Ditch, south to the Silver Saddle Ranch buildings themselves. And it's a shorter section. So the reason there are 3 segments in part because, as Anne explained, that was sort of how the grant was structured. And we weren't sure of exactly the environmental constraints that we might come across on the riverbank trail. But also for bidding purposes, because, we don't know exactly where the cost to build these trails are going to come in when we get bids. So by structuring them in segments and having some as additive alternative bids, we can see if the city has enough money to build 1 or 2 or potentially all 3 segments.
I didn't see in any of the reports a report on the studies along the river about the effect on the wildlife there.
Hi there. For the record, Lindsay Boyer, Senior Natural Resource Specialist for Carson City Open Space. So I worked with the consultants to complete the avian surveys along the river. So the basic setup for that project is we had 11 monitoring sites at Buzzy's Ranch, and we had 3 additional sites across that ditch at Riverview, just so we could compare and contrast existing trails versus not existing trails yet. So the results from that survey basically yielded that there are birds using both segments. The birds that are utilizing Buzzies are not necessarily birds that are overly sensitive to human disturbance. There are a lot of birds that are habituated to humans anyways. And with that, the consultant did provide some recommendations, things that can be done to help mitigate if we are seeing conflicts between wildlife and users. So one proposal is potentially to have dogs only allowed on leash. Others included a full closure of the trail during nesting season if we find that that's important. So essentially what we did with that report is we were able to gather a baseline pre-trail to find out who's using the area and how sensitive that, those particular species might be. And then with that, we plan on doing subsequent surveys each spring just to determine how things have changed. So ultimately, the report found that there would be negligible impacts or none.
Yeah, we do have a bit of a resource in the Friends of Silver Saddle as far as birds along the Carson River too. So we want to be sure that we take advantage of their expertise if we can. Any other, Margie, did you have a comment or question?
Yes, I have a couple of whatever you're going to call them. Number one, I'm guessing that the section A of the trail section A, you just drew this, you haven't actually gone in and to see just how it's going to go yet, or did you do that research?
Are you talking about the typical sections that were on this board down here, like the typical trail sections? Yeah.
Yes.
No, so the way we design these things these days, we've got lots of technology. So these corridors were flown with a drone that created, not only took the pictures that you see on these strip maps, but also can portray the topography down to a pretty high level of accuracy, roughly 4 inches, right, in vertical contour. And then that creates a digital terrain model or lots of data. And we can create the corridor that you can see on, maybe we could just hold that board up, that mirrors or shows these different trail sections. On Prison Hill, we have a 10-foot wide trail that slopes into the hill and a ditch on the uphill side. So what that does is it collects water from the uphill, but also water from the ditch. So you don't have it running off and shedding off on the downhill side. And you can plug that typical section into this digital terrain model, and it'll come out and it'll show you exactly where the contours are going to go, exactly where the catch points are going to go, and exactly what's going to happen to the terrain as you build the trail there.
Okay, thank you. My next question is about the proposed trail section number 2, or what are you, 3, B, 2?
B is along the river.
B is along the river, okay. Did you use the same process then to lay out that trail plan?
Yes.
How much armoring is going to be required?
Are you in case it floods? Is that your concern?
In case of flooding, yes.
So the trail runs essentially, not exactly, because the river meanders, but along the length of the river. So it's not across the direction the water's going to come from, for the most part. So if you have, and as I mentioned earlier, it is a structural section, so you have compacted aggregate base and compacted DG. It is in the floodplain. So when the big flood comes, it is going to be underwater. Exactly the velocity of the water where the trail is, that's pretty much what drives how much erosion there's going to be. We did not specifically model that, but typically outside the river channel itself, the velocity is considerably less than in the river channel and immediately outside it. So we didn't make any specific measures to protect it from major floods. What we did do is protect it from water that might run off of Buzzy's Ranch and go from the side, the west basically, over the trail into the river. Where those low spots occur, we've what we call armoring. We have a little trench basically on the downhill side of the river, trail rather, in which we put riprap or rock. And so what that does, it protects the downhill side so that you don't, I can't say you eliminate gullying across it, but you'll greatly reduce it. So that should help protect the integrity of the trail.
I asked that question because I don't want us to develop a trail that's going to have to be rebuilt every few years. And I trust that we have better technology now than we did many years ago, but I have a question for Greg now on this. How, regarding the Empire Ranch Trail along the river, we lost some big sections of that in the flood just a few years ago. Is that accurate?
Correct. In 2017, the flood took out some pretty big segments of the Empire Ranch Trail, or the riverbank, due to riverbank cutting. And also the trail was damaged in the flooding, and a lot of the damage occurred in return flow. after the floods. So the trail was closed for, until recently, we were able to get it reopened. And it's not the same condition that it was originally, but it is open and it's being
Okay.
used quite a bit.
So the construction of the Empire Ranch Trail wasn't as solid as what the proposed construction of this segment would be?
I think I'll let Chaz speak to that, but the Empire Ranch Trail probably didn't have the same design, and I think it was closer to the river than our new design.
I'm not exactly familiar with the damage that was done to the Empire Ranch Trail, but I understand from working with Rob Fellows from Public Works, I don't know if Rob's here or not, that's one of the reasons why we introduced, in fact, it was the city Public Works idea to protect the downhill side of the trail for exactly the reason Greg mentioned, with when these flows come off the pastures to the river, that's when the trail's more likely to be damaged. And so that's why where the low spots are, we have this protection on the downhill side. So we hope that we have addressed the circumstances that caused the erosion previously.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Okay, we'll come back to the committee when we're done with public comment, but are there any other committee comments at this time? Okay, I'd like to ask for public comment. We'd appreciate your thoughts and ideas. If you have questions, we'll try to get answers. And if we could ask to keep your comments as concise as you can, but make your point, and we'll give everyone a chance to talk, but we want to have everybody able to provide their input, and if you have similar comments to someone else, we don't need to repeat them all, but you can indicate you agree or you have the same suggestions or questions. So with that, if you would come forward, push the little button on one of the speakers, introduce yourself, and please let us know what you think. Yeah, it's okay, thanks.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Tom Donaldson. I'm a Nevada native, longtime Carson City resident. My wife and I live along Carson River Road. There are 13 houses along that road, and we're one of them, kind of right in the middle. I'd like to start with thanking all of you. You've done some great things for the city. That's the main reason we bought that house on Carson River Road, is because of the open space and basically feeling like ranchers but not having to do any of the work or paying in the expenses. Love the view, love the location. And I think the trail overall is a wonderful idea. I think there's a lot of use that could be made of the trail, especially along the river there, along the, east side of the ranch, west side of the river. That's an almost impossible area to access. I know there's that huge ditch on the north end of that trail where it would tie into the existing Riverview Park Trail. I don't know if a culvert, frankly, will do it. I think a bridge might be more appropriate. But the concerns that we have involve the Section A. Certainly the portion of Section A from the intersection of Fifth Street and Carson River Road down to where the proposed first road crossing across Carson River Road, there's probably no other way to access Mexican Ditch Trail other than to build that portion of the trail. However, once you cross onto the existing Mexican Ditch Road, there's no reason to continue the Prison Hill Trail past that down to Silver Saddle Ranch. Because then it's a redundant trail. We already have one on the east side of our properties. It's a similar 10 to 12 foot DG trail on top of base. To build another one across the street on the west side of our properties just seems like a waste of money, time, and expenses. I would propose that you put a crossing there on Carson River Road with the advanced warning signs, just like they have down at the crossing into Silver Saddle Ranch from the end of Mexican Ditch Trail and the new trail, Section B. Because I guarantee you, given the speed of traffic on Carson River Road, and frankly, after we moved to Carson River Road, I contacted the city to do a survey, and they did a traffic survey. At the time, I think the speed limit was 45 miles an hour, and I knew that some of those cars were traveling 70 to 80 miles an hour based on my representation of law enforcement officers over the years and some training that I've had. So they did that. They calculated that there's 1,000 vehicles that travel across Carson River Road in front of our house every single day. I couldn't believe it, frankly, but that's what the counters showed. So the amount of traffic, the speed limit, they actually did reduce the speed limit to 40. That's helped a little bit. But pulling out of our driveway, and it would be the same with crossing Carson River Road in a crosswalk. I walk my dog every morning, or that I'm home anyhow, down Carson River Road and cross into Silver Saddle Ranch. There's no crosswalk currently at the end of Mexican Ditch Trail to make that crossing. So fortunately, my dog minds pretty well, and I'm careful and watch. Even the school bus in the morning is going 40 or 50 miles an hour through there, and none of them will stop or even slow down, even if my dog and I are standing there. So that's certainly a good thing to have that advanced warning system where that's going to cross, but I think one needs to be there at that first crossing across Carson River Road, and then you don't need any trail past that because you have the Mexican Ditch Trail already. So to have redundant trails just doesn't make any sense to me. And I guess if we could have that answered, why we need 2 trails along Carson River Road, at least from that first road crossing to the end of the Mexican Ditch Trail, that would be helpful to me. I think that money also needs to be put into like I said, a bridge across the top of Section B, because that, I think, substantial drainage ditch, I think Chaz characterized it as, is a major crossing there. I think it's going to need something similar to the bridges that are along Mexican Ditch Trail and the other sections of the trail that the city's put in over the years, including, I think, the most recent one was between the golf course and the north end of the River View Park trails. So those are my thoughts. I'll also let you know that I'm the recently elected president of the Friends of Silver Saddle Ranch. I think you might hear from Nancy and Kathy and a couple others from my organization. I wanted to at least disclose that to you. I imagine we'll be dealing with each other in the future, but those are my thoughts personally, because we're personally affected because we live in the area. And I just would like a little more information, I guess, before we can fully support the trail proposal.
Thank you, Tom. Do we want to take testimony or recommendations and have questions at the end? Do you want to take these a question at a time? And do you have a preference?
Perhaps at the end, Mr. Chair, let's hear the comments. I think some of them may be similar.
Okay. Is that okay, Mihaela? Okay. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Who else would like to make some comments?
Good evening, Mr. Chair and committee. I'm David Deneen. I live at 6035 Sedge Road, east of the Carson River, up off of Deer Run Road. I too am a board member of Friends of Silver Saddle Ranch, but this is my personal stuff going on here today. I travel that route every day, and I understand Tom's concerns with speed because I've been behind that school bus and couldn't keep up with it. Just saying. As I was looking at your proposal, the flashing lights east of the bridge, the flashing lights near the bridge on Carson River Road, everybody speeds up as they start heading down that hill and crossing the river, going from 25 to 40 supposedly. And my concern would be by the time they get down and see the flashing lights, that they're already going super fast at that point. And if there was a way to put flashing lights further up the hill on the east side of the river, of the bridge, I think that would be helpful because it's kind of a blind corner. You come around the corner as you go down and cross the bridge. So I would think maybe looking at that, you know, if it was flashing further up, at least they know to look for people. You know, by the time they see it when they're on the bridge, they're going fast already. I'm a equine person. I have mules and horses. I'm the one that gave the wagon rides this weekend. And I love using those trails. There's been some talk amongst the equine people that some people would like those trails closed to equines. And our hope is that it would continue to be multiple use because those are great trails. And there's a lot of equine people with houses around that area, so I hope that's part of it. And then I was also wondering about a lot of the bridges that you create have the poles in the middle of them. I think maybe so ATVs and side-by-sides can't cross. But that also, I like to use a cart with my horses, and that negates us from using carts on some of these trails. And Riverview is amazing. We use it all the time. Luckily, there is an entryway off of Marsh Road, I believe, for that. But maybe considering about the poles and the bridges as well. Again, that's personal thoughts, not part of our board. I appreciate your work on this.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all your help this weekend. Okay, any other comments? Good evening.
My name is Lucy Dupertuis, and I hike frequently and bike around Silver Saddle Ranch in Pleasant Hill. And my question, I have a question. I heard somebody say about, well, maybe we should have dogs on leash when certain birds are nesting or something. And I would like to make a suggestion that dogs be required to be on leash all the time. Because when you're on a bike, they chase you. And when you're hiking, dog owners really don't control their dogs. And I heard someone mention that, and I just wanted more clarification, and also to urge that maybe dogs should be leashed on these trails. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're certainly taking those kinds of, comments, but at this point, that's input, and we have those kinds of issues in other places as well. And I think your comments are well taken. Do we have other comments? Are we that formidable? Okay, well, it's nice to have everyone here, and we'll ask if there's any discussion. And how did you want to handle follow-up on the comments that we've heard?
Perhaps two of the questions I not only just heard here, but also during our open house earlier, relates maybe to the equestrian use on these trails. And yes, equestrian use would be allowed. These are non-motorized trails. So pedestrian, bicycle, and equestrian, they will be closed to motorized use. And then the other question relates to the existing crossing at Carson River Road near the entrance to Silver Saddle Ranch. So on the north side of the road where the Mexican Ditch Trail comes out, one of the reasons that we are looking to utilize our access easement further north to cross the road is because of safety and visibility. Whether you're hiking or in a vehicle, way up tall coming on the Mexican Ditch Trail to Carson River Road traveling south, the visibility is horrendous. There's a blind turn, uphill turn to the north. we heard about the speed of vehicles. It is so unsafe. And that is why we're looking at the alternatives in that area and crossing further above with great visibility in both distances. Is there another question, Mr. Chair, that I should answer?
Well, I was going to say, you think you're in the country, but when we're looking at open space and trails, we really have to remember, I think, that traffic does need to slow down and be slowed down. And I drive that road every day, and you see a lot of people going quickly. And I think it's going to be part of the introduction and part of the enforcement and part of what we're going to have to do as a community is just really zero in on making it safer in terms of vehicle speeds and doing everything we can in design to create the safest crossings. I mean, it's not much better when you get to the top of the bridge on the Deer Run side and you run into Sierra Vista Lane, which is almost impossible to make a left turn out of if you really want to see the cars coming up the hill. So I think we have those kinds of things to be aware of and that we're going to need to deal with. But I don't think at this point, I think the inputs are well taken, and I think there's been a real effort to create as safe a crossing as possible. But we do need to make sure we keep that paramount. Were there any other questions or comments that we wanted to address? Or Chaz, did you have anything that you wanted to add or respond to? Or
Chaz Macquarie for the record, Loomis and Associates. With regard to the big ditch at the north end of Buzz's Ranch, just, between Buzz's and Riverview Park, it's an interesting hydrologic circumstance because the drainage is cut off initially by the Mexican ditch, as you all know, that comes off there. And then there's the fields, and that ditch is in part drainage for the fields, which, funnily enough, don't go at a constant slope from the Prison Hill side to the river. There's like lower land in the middle, and the water flows north and then turns the corner in that big ditch and goes to the river that way. And so a bridge is nice, and they look good, and they cost a lot of money. And the culvert there is adequately sized to take certainly the 25-year flow from that, and probably more than that. So I do not see the culvert being an issue from a capacity standpoint. It's a cost-saving measure, quite frankly, because it saves us several tens of thousands of dollars as opposed to a bridge. So we get more trail by having no bridge there. I would like to address the advance warning signs at Carson River Park, as the comment was made as you coming east on Carson River Road and down the hill towards the bridge. So the flashing signs themselves are at the crossing, but there's also advance warning signs, typically 200 to 250 feet on either side of the crossing itself. So you have an advance warning sign, which is not typically, the standard is not to make those flashing. And then you have the actual flashing signs at the crosswalk itself. And that is basically the AASHTO setup for this type of crossing. They don't recommend having the flashing signs way in advance of the actual crossing. So that's why it's set up that way. But I did want to point out that there is advance warning signs. They're not flashing. Thank you. I think we do have a bridge, as was noted, between Riverview Park and the golf course. And that's a bigger drainage. And it's also withstood inundation on more than one occasion. So I'm sure you can design a culvert that will do the same. Okay, any other? Margie.
I have a question we're reviewing 90% designs. Do we have to make a decision on the length of Trail A, or can that be deferred for future discussion as we see how things go.
Well, if I understand, we're basically looking at a 90% design that would have 3 or 4 phases to a project. And when it goes to bid, we would then have numbers, and at that time, we would have the ability, if the budget required it, to reduce, if you will, the scope of the work to match the budget. But I think we're looking at our next checkpoint being a proposed agreement for construction. Yeah, Jeremy.
One question I don't think has been addressed yet is, Tom mentioned this issue of redundant trails. Just personally, I could speak to that, but I'd like to hear maybe from Greg or maybe Ann as to the reason why we're, we've got this section of trail that seems like we could save some money by just crossing the street and then using the existing Mexican ditch trail. However, I could say that just as an avid mountain biker, I like to have choice. I like to be able to take options, take different loops. And what comes to mind, especially with regard to the speed on this road, is I'm thinking of Big Meadow along 88, or is it 89? You have a parking lot on the south side of the highway, and you have to cross the highway. And I always have my kids in tow. It's terrifying, absolutely terrifying. I usually have them scooped up in my arms running across the road because people do not honor the speed limit. And so if we were to reduce that with a trail where we had an option on the west side of the road that just was one continuous trail all the way down to Silver Saddle Ranch, just personally, I would think that would be preferable. But I would be interested to hear why from the landowner, from Tom, perhaps what's the big deal about having 2 trails on either side of your property?
Again, Tom Donaldson for the record. Obviously, the Mexican Ditch Trail was there when we bought our property. We use it. Quite a few people use it. I don't think it's over capacity. I think it can certainly withstand additional mountain bikers, walkers, equestrian, wherever it happens to be that may come off of the intersection there at 5th and Carson River Road. It just seems that why be redundant? Why waste that money? Why not make the crossing that they already have proposed here halfway down Section A from the west side of Carson River Road to the existing Mexican Ditch Trail? Why not make that a safer crossing? There's no proposal, it looks like, at least on the map, to have advanced warning signs on that crossing. And I think that's where something's going to happen. So do away with the lower portion of Section A, make that a safer crossing, use the additional money for a bridge or whatever else you might need. It just seems to make more financial sense rather than having another choice for the mountain bikers, more traffic on both sides of our properties when there's no need for it, frankly.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. And I guess one other matter, I know that David's opposed to them, but some kind of vehicle barrier is needed at the south end of Mexican Ditch Trail. I'll tell you that weekly, if not every couple of weeks, there are motorized vehicles, usually cars, people that are lost or not knowing what they're doing, driving up Mexican Ditch Trail until they get to the barrier at the first bridge there, and then have to try to turn around. There's really no space there, and then drive out. There's people in the middle of the night, don't know what they're doing, whether it's drugs or whatever. But that's another thing that's going to have to be addressed, I think, at the south end of the Mexican Ditch Trail, another expense that the savings from the south section anyhow of Section A could be spent on. So.
Is that something that we could consider incorporating as part of the design? I know it's at 90%, which is a little late in the game, but some sort of a barrier?
Other than the existing bollard that is there? Or,
There's nothing at the south end of Mexican Ditch Trail where it hits Carson River Road. There's one sign, and that's the only thing that keeps people from driving up Mexican Ditch Trail
I think that's
to that
something
first-
that we could look at.
first bridge.
Yeah, if that's an issue now, there's no reason we can't try to address, at least to begin addressing that. You have to balance all the various uses, but as a practical matter, cars are not, motorized vehicles are not allowed there, so.
And I believe the rancher has access there because of the fences. Sometimes the cattle get out and they have to go in there. I think the city uses it to maintain it, of course, but they'd have access by unlocking the barrier and getting in there. And I guess the rancher could too, as far as that goes. But I think that is just another issue that has to be addressed.
Yeah, I think when you get equestrians, particularly with carts, you have other issues, but I think lock gates with keys to the appropriate people or that kind of thing are ways to deal with, that kind of situation if you have a larger approved vehicle of some kind, like a carriage. So,
Thank you.
thank you. Any other comments from the committee? Jeremy?
Just following up with the city, what is the reason from the city for having that segment of the trail? What's the advantage?
Okay, so Greg Berger, and Trails Coordinator. The current design that we see today is the culmination of planning that goes back to 1996. So I mean, I've been here for just a couple of years. I think Ann's been here for about 10 years. So this planning goes back well beyond where, our presence here. And as far as redundancy, there's a couple of other things in addition to the planning that's gone into this for decades. There also is a vision to have a trail, a nice user-friendly trail that goes all the way around Prison Hill. So this would be a segment of that trail. And then also, it eliminates people from having to cross in the middle of Carson River Road, eliminates having to have everybody cross. The option will be there because there'll be so many options, as you mentioned, Mr. Hall, so many options for loops. So having that crossing does create more options, but if we cannot have everybody crossing there, I think it makes it safer.
Thanks, Greg.
Any other comments from the committee? Okay, this is not an action item. If people have further questions or comments, please feel free to take them up with staff, excuse me, later on, or talk to Chaz, or city staff to follow up on any questions that you haven't had answered, or if something comes up as you think about it after our meeting tonight. Okay, with that, we'll close agenda item 3A and go to 3B. This is again a discussion item. Chaz, thank you very much. Michelle, thank you. Discussion only regarding public survey and planning efforts for the Prison Hill Recreation Area. Greg, I think you're still in the focus here.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to take you on a virtual walk around Prison Hill. So we're going to start at the north end of Prison Hill. And our project there is the Fifth Street Trailhead and Trails Improvement Project. So just a tiny bit of background. The Prison Hill Recreation Area consists of 2,500 acres. It was transferred to Carson City from the Bureau of Land Management in 2015 under a conservation easement. And the conservation easement dictates what we can and can't do with Prison Hill. And under that conservation easement, OHV usage is allowed on the southern 960 acres. The northern the northern part of the hill is is required to be non-motorized. So the very north part of the hill, when we took Prison Hill in 2015, did see quite a bit of motorized activity. There was quite a bit of, there's a lot of user-built roads and trails in there. There was a lot of damage. One of the first things that Ann Bollinger did when we got the property was to start building fence. And when the fence came down, she replaced that. And then when they went around the fence, she extended it. And eventually, people learned that the northern part of the hill is non-motorized. And so then we got a recreational trails program grant to do improvements at the north end of Prison Hill. I'm happy to say that that project is almost finished. We've installed a vault toilet. We've made improvements to the trailhead parking. We made improvements to the drainage problems. We added a covered picnic table, and we developed a 3-loop system of trails on the north end of Prison Hill. We've decommissioned or scarified a lot of the roads that existed. We recently had a parks work day. We reseeded the trails, and we're waiting to see who did the best job. We'll see in the spring. Anyway, I see that as a success story because when I'm out there now hiking those trails, I run into a lot of people that I talk to everybody, and the feedback is always positive. I ran into one lady recently that was on her mountain bike, and she said, "This is an area that I used to try to avoid because of the activity and the conditions here, and now I come here all the time, and I love it." So I think we were very successful with the north end of Prison Hill. So now we're going to continue on our walk, and we're going to go down the new Prison Hill segment of the Carson River Trails that we were just talking about, and we're going to wind up on the Mexican Ditch Trail, continuing south, and we're going to hit the Mexican Dam and where the Mexican Ditch has an intake. So the structure there is very old, it's unsafe, rickety. It's not very user-friendly for a lot of different types of uses. So right now, with help from a grant from the Carson Water Subconservancy District, we are constructing a new crossing at the intake. And that crossing will be equestrian friendly, and it will be people with small watercraft will be able to navigate or to be able to, they'll be able to portage around the dam at that site. So we'll actually at some point be able to extend the Carson River Aquatic Trail and utilize that crossing for small watercraft. Also, that's another component of completing the loop trail around Prison Hill. So now we're going to continue south, and we're going to come to our OHV area. And I'd like to show you, this is a PowerPoint that our partner, the National Off-Highway Vehicle Conservation Council, showed to the recent Rec Trails Commission Grant Committee. I'm happy to say we did obtain grants for 2020 from both Rec Trails and from the Nevada Off-Highway Vehicle Commission, so we'll be continuing progress on the south end of Prison Hill. But I wanted to show you their slideshow because it does kind of talk about what we have going on in Prison Hill on the south end right now. So, let's see. Oh, let me hit this. Okay. So like I said, when we received Prison Hill in 2015, the area was largely unmanaged. We recognized the need for to manage it. The conditions were heading downhill, and we partnered with National Off-Highway Vehicle Conservation Council. We obtained a grant from the Nevada Off-Highway Vehicle Commission in 2018 to develop a management plan for the area. That was produced after a number of public meetings and a public survey. And then This year, 2019, we obtained more grant funding from both Rec Trails and from Nevada Off-Highway Vehicle Commission. And one of the things that grant funding went towards is education. So we've started educational programs at the south end of Prison Hill where we're trying to, we have brochures and some signage. We're trying to let people know what we're doing. We're also conducting what we call tech checks. And so with the tech check, we're checking for spark arresters, for sound, and for their off-highway vehicle registration. And I'm hoping that this summer we can get our rangers out there more often and do more tech checks and more contacts. And in this photo over here, you can see Ranger Costello is doing a sound meter check. Okay, so the funding for this year also went to putting in signage. We put in quite a bit of signage. We have signs talking about, what kind of equipment is required when you come into Prison Hill. We've started to close certain roads that are in very bad condition, but when we do that, we always offer an alternative for someone to take. So we don't want to close something without offering an alternative because it's largely ignored. Okay, we've started doing a lot of rehabilitation. We, as you can see in these photos, we have taken some of the roads that we have closed. We've done vertical mulching. The third, the second photo from the right shows that where there was a road, and now you can see between the rocks and the vertical mulching, you can barely tell that there was a road there. We're putting in rock line drainage ditches. We've done some other scarifying, and we're trying to manage some of the sediment that's coming off of Prison Hill. I know one of the big issues is Golden Eagle Lane and the sediment that crosses Golden Eagle Lane, and the road itself is beyond the scope of this project, but we're hoping that as a result of our project, we can reduce the amount of erosion hitting that road. Okay, recently, or in October, we had a cleanup day. We have partnered with the Pine Mountains Trails Association, and they sponsored a cleanup on Prison Hill. I think we took out, I can't remember, it was hundreds and hundreds of pounds of garbage that we cleaned up on that day. We did that in conjunction with the Carson High School Navy ROTC. And we also had a group of volunteers from the rock crawler community who went down into Dead Truck Canyon and removed the Jeep that's been down there since New Year's Day 2018. We've been trying for a long time to get it out. We were looking at various means, helicopter and some different things, but the rock crawlers were able to get it out with virtually no damage to Prison Hill, and the Jeep is gone. So we were pretty happy about that. Okay, we're continuing. We have a working group that has been functioning for the last 18 months or so. It's made up of adjacent residents and various user groups. It's a way that we can keep people informed on the project and also get some feedback and suggestions on what to do. And one of the really critical and important things that for us to make this project successful has been partnering with various user groups. One of our big partners, like I mentioned, has been the Pine Mountains Trails Association. We've also gotten a lot of help from Sierra Stompers, from the Nevada Four-Wheel Drive Association, from Comstock Crawlers, and from others. And when we first started this project, we were met with some suspicion. Some people thought that maybe we were going to close the area, but I think now everybody recognizes that we're trying to make this area better for everyone. Left unmanaged, eventually the only thing that would have happened would be that it would result in closure because the damage would have continued unchecked. And what we're doing now is trying to make an area that better respects and protects the natural resources while at the same time gives our user groups a better place to play. more opportunities. So I mentioned earlier the NOVAC, the Nevada, or the National Off-Highway Vehicle Conservation Council. They held their annual convention in Reno this year, and one of the things that they did was they came down to Prison Hill for a day for their mobile workshop. We had about 100 participants from all over the country. I thought it was a very successful day. We had a lot of people that asked a lot of questions, gave us input. People were very impressed with what we have to offer in Carson City. And that's one thing that we find is that we have a unique area. We have an area, it's an OHV area within a city, managed by a city. We can't find another area that's just the same as that. We have not been able to benchmark with another community, and that's why we have partnered with these organizations to help us to create our management plan. Okay, so our staging area, plans for the staging area. Well, part of our grant for this year included layout and design. And so our staging area, this is something that's already been done. We redid the road, the entrance road, and did some scarifying and decommissioning of some of the erosive areas coming into the staging area. We added signage directing people in the staging area. We added signage on Golden Eagle Lane, warning people that there's no motorized vehicle access beyond this point. And some of the feedback we've gotten from residents around Golden Eagle Lane is that it has reduced traffic into that area. So on the staging area, we also plan to put in a tot lot, some training areas. We have already put in a kiosk sign, and we have a temporary ADA compliant restroom there. Okay, some of the other things that we've done with our grant funding this year, developed a sign plan. We developed an OHV barrier closure plan. There are some areas where we are trying to keep OHVs out of because of environmental sensitivity or because of incursions into private property or because of safety issues. We also are working on a monitoring plan. Oops. All right, so when we started, or when Prison Hill came to us in 2015, or when we started this project, we did an inventory of trails and roads. We found that there are 71 miles of trails and roads on the 960 acres. And for our 2020 plan, well, this is our 2020 plan, we would like to complete a loop trail to the summit and start working on a few realignments and some new trails. Ultimately, the build out will look like this, or that's the concept plan, and it will result in 25 miles of trails. So we're going to go from 71 miles to 25 miles, but the trails are going to be well designed. They're going to flow with the landscape and the contours, and they should be a lot funner and a lot safer for user groups. Okay. Any questions on that? All right. I'm going to then continue around. Let's see. Prison Hill. Okay. All right. So the next project on Prison Hill, as we continue around on our conceptual virtual trail around the hill, we come to the west side of Prison Hill, the area around Kuntz Lane and the water tanks. In July and August of 2019, we conducted an online survey to solicit public opinion as we develop a master plan for the Prison Hill Recreation Area, and we received 190 responses. The survey focused primarily on trailheads and access points around Prison Hill, and then we also wanted to get people's thoughts about the west side of Prison Hill around the Kuntz Lane area. So a little bit of background on that. There are, Oops, where's my,
Were you just deleting those?
uh-oh. I don't know what happened to, yeah. There we go. So we should be able to just go, let's go down, there we go. That's not where I want. There we go. Now we got it. Oh, you're right. Yeah. Okay. All right, so the area that we're talking about around Coons Lane and the water tanks, there's two parcels there. And as you come into the area off of Edmonds Drive on Coons Lane, you pass through three parcels that belong to the Bureau of Land Management. And then you enter the next area that's highlighted in yellow on the map. It's about 116 acres, and it's designated as parks and public purpose. So Prison Hill itself is open space, but this particular parcel is parks and public purpose. There's a lot of things that we could do with that that we wouldn't be able to do on open space. So far, the area is largely unmanaged. There's two trailheads in the area. One is off of Coons Lane, called the Coons Lane Trailhead, and the other one is off of Clearview Drive, the Clearview Drive Trailhead. So when we conducted our survey, there's a couple of highlights from the survey. 47% of respondents said that they get to Prison Hill via car, and we found that the most popular trailhead on Prison Hill is the Coons Lane Trailhead. 28% of respondents said that's their favorite trailhead, which was quite a bit higher than the next two, Silver Saddle Ranch and Fifth Street Trailhead, tied for second as favorite trailheads, with each receiving 14% of respondents. So Coons Lane clearly is the favorite trailhead right now. 68% of respondents said they would like to see improvements made to the road that gets to the trailhead on Coons Lane. And 68% of respondents also said that neighborhood access points are very important to them. And 62% of respondents said that vehicular activity in this particular area, that's with highlighted in yellow there, should be either restricted or limited. And we're planning a public open house on January 9th, so we can get more feedback and input on what we should do with this area. But initially, our now retired parks planner and I came up with just some hand-drawn proposals, which we're having these proposals drawn up professionally for our presentation or for our open house on January 9th. But just to give you an idea of some of the things we were thinking about with this area, one option would be to fix the road on Coons Lane going into the Coons Lane Trailhead. We could do some improvements to the Coons Lane Trailhead. We could fence the road in there, which would restrict vehicular access. We could also make some improvements to the Clearview Trailhead, and again, we could put fencing in there. One of the things we need to know is that the right thing to do, to restrict vehicular access in there? There's a lot of reasons to do that. There's also arguments against it, and so we still need more information on that. We also looked at the option of, another option of putting a trailhead right at the end, or right, I guess it would be just to the east side of the BLM properties, and then we wouldn't have to put the expense in of improving the road up to the existing Coons Lane Trailhead. We also looked at the option of utilizing where the water tank is now. That's a new location. There's an old location immediately to the north. It's a big cleared area. We looked at the option of possibly converting that into a trailhead, but Public Works has other plans for that area, so that is no longer an option. Bottom line is we don't know what to do with this area. It's not under open space's purview, but it does provide access to open space. We still need some more input from the public to find out what we want to do. We don't have any current funding, but once we do develop a master plan, then we can use that to seek funding to do something with this area. And clearly, it's a very popular area. We do need to have a plan for that 116 acres. And that's the end of what I've got. So are there any questions?
Thank you, Greg. This is a discussion item. We'll take comments or questions from the committee, and then we'll open it up to public comment. Any committee questions? Jeremy?
Greg, why is alternative 2 cheaper?
Okay. So alternative 1 would require fixing the road. As you probably all know, the existing road from Edmonds Drive up to the existing Coons Lane Trailhead is in poor condition. One of the things that the survey respondents did tell us is that they would like to see that road improved. Right now, there's no funding to do that. So we looked at the possible less expensive option, which would be to not utilize that road, just convert it to a trail and put the trailhead farther down. I think there's a lot of arguments against that option, being, the number one being that the public currently likes and wants the existing trailhead located where it is. And I think that probably we're going to find, as we do seek more public comment, that's going to be the case. But anyway, that is why that option 2 would be less expensive. It's less road.
Okay, so it's just the road, and then I guess ongoing maintenance too.
Yes.
Okay.
Committee members? Margie?
Well, I didn't have a question, but now I do. So, so alternative 2 is less expensive, but are you taking into account the cost of rehabilitating all that area along what would then be a trail up to what is currently a trailhead?
No, we haven't, we're not that far along to even look at costs yet.
No, but I mean, you're saying it's less expensive, and I was just thinking about some other costs that would be associated with alternative 2.
Right, well, if we did do the conversions and did do some decommissioning and some corrective actions to the erosional issues, then it would be more or less a one-time expense rather than having long-term maintenance of a road.
Jeremy?
So I just thought of something else. I imagine that some folks that live in this area would be opposed to this idea, and that's just what it is. It's just an idea. But there's, 2 trailheads that are less than a quarter mile apart. Does the city really need to maintain a second trailhead at Clearview? I mean, we've got access points, which I think are completely adequate, but do we really need to even consider a second trailhead?
Yeah, no, I think that's a legitimate question, and that's one that should be up for discussion as we move forward with the master plan for this area.
Any other comments or questions from the committee at this point? Okay, are there any public comments regarding what we've heard on Greg's presentation? Hi, Ron.
Got it. Chairman Scott, board, staff, my name is Ron Moe. I've been a resident of Carson City since 1979 and going up hiking around Prison Hill since probably 1987, 88. Originally it was in the northern section, and then I got into the south end, and I've said this one other time, the views are the best from anywhere in Carson City. And the OHV, we all know the damage they've caused. I mean, the staging, the bottom area is obliterated, it's a blight, there's no soil. But one of the things is density of trails or roads. Everything that I've seen on the mapping they might say trails, but they might have started out motorcycle trails, but they grow. And you've been up there, and here's deep erosion, and then whether motorcycles or four-wheel drives, they'll go over. They get on down to rock, they'll move over. So I'm hoping that Mike Hildesheim and Dick Duford can make things much better. I certainly hope so. But looking on the internet recently, I looked at trail density. And the most dense place I saw was in Texas at 6.43 miles of trail per square mile. Here, and I'm seeing different standards between forest areas and all. And I've seen mostly from 1.5 trail or road per square mile up to the low threes per square mile. Here was one place in Texas, 6.43 miles of trail per square mile. Here at Prison Hill, we've got 1.5 square miles of OHV territory, 1.5. And here they've got proposed 20 miles in that 1.5 square mile. And what they have miles of trail, and I'm just concerned, I'm not all over the place in the southern area, but I look and I see, and I'm hiking by, and I see generally where I think, where their trails and proposed trails are, and they're on ridges. They're supposed to be more sustainable. But I also see right along the ridges, I see all the drainages. And I see tracks up there. And what follows motorcycle tracks come the four-wheel drives. And what holds the soil together? This was the first working group meeting. Mark Hildesheim said this is going to be tough. I'm not sure the exact words. There's no clay to hold the soil together. So what's holding our soil together? Plants. And I'm seeing these people go all over. I'm just so concerned. Hopefully these drainages will all be blocked because the erosion is tremendous. I wonder, this is granite on the south end. This is, I think, granite, and what I've read, where there's granite, there's radon, there's radon emissions. I wonder how the heck the Eagle Lane people are, and I wonder what the radon's like in their water and soils with all this drainage.
Ron, that's a little outside of our immediate scope.
Okay, well, anyway, this has to do with trails, erosion. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. One of the things that we have here is part of the conservation plan is an OHV area. And so we're in a management role, not necessarily a do we want to have it here or not kind of role. And so I think we have to be really aware of the kinds of concerns that you're bringing to bear here and you're raising. But we have to, we're trying to find a balance because we do have a mandate on the OHV area. And frankly, our OHV residents in Carson City, we're happy to have a place where we can manage what they can do within town to a sustainable level, which would be our goal. But at the same time, the BLM, has an awful lot of area outside of town, and you see what unmanaged can do. And Greg, I think, has worked really hard to try to bring this forward, and I think we've got a ways to go, but I'm real pleased with the partnerships we have and the grants that we've been able to get to try to do things better, and hopefully we can be an example for people, but I understand your concern. Other public comment? Hi, Robin.
Hello. Yeah. Robin Orloff here, resident of Carson City, frequent user of Prison Hill, as you all know. And I think we're making a real concerted effort. I'm kind of confused because let me go back a step. In this last discussion, we were talking about circumnavigating Prison Hill, kind of going on a tour of that, and also the survey of the yellow area at Kuntz. So it's like we're talking about two different things, and I have comments on both. But I'm going to go back. I have a question for you all. I have a copy of the conservation easement here. I'm not a lawyer, but I do know that when the land was brought to Carson City from BLM, it came with this conservation easement that is the Department of Interior. And I'm wondering, and I understand that OHV is actually mandated in this. It's part of this document. It's legally mandated. It's allowed in the south end of Prison Hill. So I'm not questioning that. I think what I'd like you to explain to me, someone to explain to me that there's a perpetual conservation easement to protect, preserve, and enhance the conservation values of the property. So I'd really like someone to explain that to me. We have the OHV area. Mark Hildesheim is awesome. He's from the very beginning, and I have quotes from the meeting of 10/15/18. He said, this area has been highly impacted. It's a desert area. It sees impact with OHV use. We're here to fix it. We see it's damaged. We want to make trails that are sustainable. And at that meeting in October, people asked about fall line. They asked anyway. But the whole purpose is to make it a model OHV area in a desert environment. So I think we're all on the same page. I'm not saying OHV isn't allowed, but I really would like someone to explain how the conservation easement applies to this land. We have open space, we have Kings Canyon, we have the Riverview Park. They don't have a conservation easement. And I guess it's a question to all of you. How does this easement impact this land, this open space land, and determine how we develop it? Because I think that's key to what we're all talking about. Can I ask for an answer?
Yes. So there's a couple of questions, I think, in there. I will try. So the conservation easement was, if I can even recall, a requirement of the omnibus Public Land Management Act of 2009. And now I'm even going to step back. It does get to be complex. When Carson City first started talking about the land exchange, conveyance, federal agencies, the Washoe Tribe, economic development, one of the ideas for Silver Saddle Ranch, for those who remember, was a very developed park facility, ball fields, amphitheater, very developed proposal. Many of the residents and nature advocates throughout Carson City came out and said, no, that's not the vision of Carson City. So because of that very strong opinion of the desire of the river environment, and Bruce helped me out too since you were here, they talked with our congressional delegation who supported their views and said, we will support Carson City's lands bill subject to a conservation easement on these lands to protect the conservation values. Is that right for the first step? So the conservation easement is only relevant to Prison Hill, Silver Saddle Ranch, and the Ambrose Carson River Natural Area. So only 3 areas in Carson City. Those were all BLM lands that transferred to Carson City. So what you have in your hands, yes, it talks about conservation values and the nature, nature watching, wildlife habitat, floodplains, talks about trails, development of trails, trailheads, fuels reduction projects. So we do have the responsibility to protect these lands as they were given to us. But it does say Carson City can construct trails and trailheads, and I believe that is what we are doing here. And through the closure and reroute, we are protecting the environment by addressing some of the environmental damage that we are seeing out there. We are rerouting the trails. We will be revegetating. In the short term, it may not be pretty because now we do have 2 trails, but as we close one and revegetate it, and it will take time, but I believe that is within the intent of the conservation easement.
Okay,
Bruce, do you
so the
have anything?
conservation,
Thank you.
I was just asking if you had anything to add to
If you're looking
that.
for a lot of discussion on this, we may want to refer you to staff and our legal counsel, Robin. In other words, we're not necessarily the interpreters of the conservation easement. And
I understand that, and I've been asking staff since Juan Guzman's time in 2010, and I've asked for discussion of this, and I know that this isn't really the time. However, it's really, I think it's pivotal to what we're doing in the OHV area. I think there are things in here that I don't feel like are being addressed. It says that the OHV area can be restricted or prohibited to meet the objectives of the conservation purpose and values. And I really feel like there are some areas that are very impacted. And I know that Member Evans and Member Inverson asked at the very beginning, what about fall line trails? What about cross-country trails? Are these going to be permitted? And Mark did say, no, they're not permitted. But there are open areas, open riding areas, and maybe you all can define open riding areas, which I think you know. Riders can go anywhere. Fall line doesn't matter. They can go sideways, up and down, crossways, up the washes. Those are open riding areas in OHV speak. And if that isn't right, you can tell me. How is that consistent with a conservation easement? And the reason I'm bringing it up today is this keeps going on and on and on. And these plans and these maps are developed, and there are 3 open areas, 2 of which are now open with signage. And I wasn't sure that was going to be allowed until it was approved. Trails are fine. Sustaining, I think Novak knows how to make sustained trails. I think they have a great plan. But there are certain things in this easement that I think we need to look at sooner rather than later, maybe even have a separate meeting just on these things. It's open riding areas, to me, are not sustainable. I don't know how they can be reconciled. And I understand this is a big thing, but I've been asking this for years. Please explain before we go further. And the other thing from the conservation easement, I've asked this in a meeting, I think 2 years ago. The BLM is supposed to oversight what we're doing on this land. And I understand and again, I'm not a lawyer, it says that the oversight should be annually. And I'm wondering, and if the BLM is coming in, if they're looking at what we're doing, they are supposed to be enforcing the conservation easement, from what I understand. BLM may prevent activity that's inconsistent with the purposes of the easement and force the restoration of areas that might be impaired, interfered with, or damaged with. And I've got to tell you that I just don't understand how open areas, developing trails, having OHVers, I'm excited because their trails are great to run. They're great to bike. And some of the trails on the ground now really flow. They're really pretty awesome. But again, is the BLM coming in annually for the oversight of this? And I asked at another meeting, I have the Horse Creek. Horse Creek is conservation easement, and Parks, our department, our staff is very involved. Every year, we get a report of whether Horse Creek is conforming to the conservation easement. And the public can't even go on that land. Prison Hill is precious. I mean, it's precious. And are we having oversight, as said in this document? And maybe our lawyer can sit down with me and talk to me about it. But I just, and it even says as a general rule, and conservation easement shall be liberally construed in favor of protecting the conservation values and the purpose of the easement. And if it is ambiguous, the provision, the conservation easement would be favored over an interpretation that would render it invalid. And I'm concerned. I mean, there's erosion. And I know the goal is to try to fix it, but I hope that we, look at some of these things. I think they're very important.
Ann or Michaela, is that something that you could take a look at and try to at least respond to some of the questions that Robin has, and maybe provide what oversight we've had from BLM or what their policies have been?
Mr. Chair, I can answer some of that right now. Yes, BLM has been doing their annual monitoring, which actually I did not know until this year, probably about 6 months ago. I can't even remember the initial phone call. And so it's actually a learning process with them. And just as we monitor Horse Creek, I helped provide guidance, and I said, well, usually when you monitor our easement, it's helpful if you call the landowner so they can join you and you can actually discuss what's been happening on the landscape. And so there's an actual written documentation that, yes, it does meet the terms of the easement, or what do we have planned next year? Or in the case for both of us, Horse Creek Ranch and Silver Saddle, there's a stewardship account, how much money is left and what's it been spent on. So yes, they have been monitoring.
And do we
Okay.
have a,
Yes,
Thank
we do.
you.
we have a report?
Yes, we do.
Are we provided with any report in writing on that at this point?
I do have past reports. I don't recall, have they been out in 2019? I don't know if they've been out in 2019. I've not seen this year's report.
Okay, thank you.
And can the public be involved and ask what is their interpretation of, open area? How is that part of the conservation easement? I hope someone can explain that to me. And even these two I have copies of the grants applications, and that went into, who is it, the Department of, wherever you got the OHV grants. And it's asked in these grants what documents are part of the grant, or part of the, where is it? Are to be considered as part of?
I think we're outside of at least the public discussion item from the standpoint of Prison Hill overall.
Okay.
Have you talked to BLM?
I haven't, because I really didn't feel like I should, but I will go talk to them. But I thought that this was all between a cooperative effort between BLM, conservation easement, and that there was oversight. I can go talk to them, but,
Well, I'm not suggesting you do, I'm asking. But
I
I do
haven't.
think there is a cooperative level of effort here among our staff and BLM. And I know you've had conversations with our staff. And if there are legal interpretations, that may be something that we ask for a little bit of legal help on.
And I would like to do that. And I'd like to address the area of open area, because I think it's against what this whole committee is expecting of the motorized area, because it does violate some of the concept of the conservation easement, but the concepts that you've expressed concerns about, fall line, erosion, cross-country travel, those kinds of things. And I'm just wondering, has anyone, if I may ask, has anyone on the advisory committee been out at the south end of Prison Hill? And have you been, okay? And have
I
you-
think we're really outside
Okay.
of our agenda item.
Right, well, maybe we should consider having,
I mean, that's
an
something,
agenda item in the future.
if there's a desire to have a discussion like that, or maybe, if there's a desire for people to come down and take a look on the ground, that may be something we could look at.
I would appreciate that because like Ron said, the damage is just tremendous. And I think it's been worse in the last few months since more publicity, more people are aware of it, more people are going out. These maps, the open areas are mapped now. That's what I'm worried about. If these are not consistent with the conservation easement, then we need to talk about it because the land is being destroyed there. You can go anywhere, anytime. Truly, you can go wherever you want. And I was just wondering if anyone had been out from the committee and to these specific areas and seen the damage. And those are not areas that are going to be fixed. Those are areas that are outside of the trail. They're not part of the trails. These are open areas where this kind of damage is being allowed.
Robin, I think we understand
Okay.
your point. So,
Okay.
Jennifer, did you have something?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jennifer Budge, Parks and Recreation Director. I really appreciate Robin's time and her passion. She really cares about this site. You can tell she's very impassioned about this. If you have legal questions that you would like us to answer, if you could come through staff, either email me or
I
Ann.
have been, and I will.
But specific legal questions, and then we can pass those on to the DA's office. I think we've
Please.
spent a lot of time, and we've tried very hard to be responsive to your questions, and we really appreciate all
Okay.
of those as well. But if there's specific legal questions, email them to me or Ann, and we'll pass them on to the DA's office, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Robin. Are there any other public comments?
Dupertwee, and I hike at Prison Hill a lot. I have two concerns. One is that I usually start in the wintertime when it's cool near Snyder and South Edmonds, that corner. And there's a fence as you go up that divides the OHV from the non-OHV area.
Oh, I think
Wait,
your
what-
light went out.
And every time I go up, I find tracks on the west side, on the non-OHV part of the area. Then the fence ends and the road goes up to the top. The division between the OHV and the hiking area is supposed to be the road, and yet there's always tracks to the west, the non-OHV area. So I'm wondering what kind of provisions are made. Are you going to make stronger fences, something to keep the OHVs out of the non-OHV area? Because not only is it more destruction of the chaparral and stuff, but it's dangerous to hikers to be hiking in a place you think you're safe and a motorcycle comes up upon you. It's a real danger. That's one question. Are you providing for a way to keep them out where they shouldn't be? And the other is right near that intersection of South Edmonds and Snyder. That's one place, dirt roads can go in, and you can go in your pickup or your OHV or something. I heard that they were planning another staging area right there. Is that the case? You didn't mention it in your tour around of the Prison Hill.
Certainly, I can address both those questions. So, no, we don't, we're not adding a second staging area.
okay,
That's, we had looked at that at one time, but that was taken off the table. And we do respond to public comments, and that was one of them. And then, also, with regard to your question on the boundary, we absolutely want to be able to keep the OHV people in the OHV area. And so we are one of our plans is a boundary designation. And so we will be doing a series of, different things like signage. We're looking at wire fencing. We're also looking at something that we call jack rail fencing, which is a heavy metal fencing. So depending upon the area and what kind of incursions we're seeing, we'll go to different options to keep people within the OHV area. I know some of the signage we put in so far to keep people out of some of the private property. The feedback has been that it's working to keep people out. And so if it doesn't, then we'll go to fencing. But we do absolutely want to keep the two, a designation between the two areas.
Good.
If you just push the button, you can let your hand go, and it'll stay green.
Okay. Anyway, there's a few stakes now along that road that goes up, but it doesn't keep them out. Well, thank you. I'm very happy that you're addressing those issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other public comments? Yep, come on forward.
Good evening. My name is Dave Bentel, Mr. Chair, and I'm a resident of Carson City for about 3.5 years now. And I used to live in Reno, you can tell by my accent. I've got a few, I made a note. I was going to write an email, and you guys have done a fantastic job. And I just want some of the specific things that I'm concerned about. This, okay. The soil erosion that Greg mentioned, adjacent to the, that area there, I've written here, the 2 areas of soil disturbance are subject to persistent stormwater and freshet erosion are the staging areas and the old OMV tracks on the west side of Golden Eagle Lane. So that's quite interesting, this thing. So the staging area is recently graded within the last 2 years or so. And to clear vegetation not already cleared by ORV access. These actions appear to have resulted in increased flow of stormwater and sediments which took out the road at the drainage road intersection. So, and I fixed that road up. You know, I take my grader out there and try and fix it up. So I'm not worried about all of that. The eroded and scoured sediment load flows into the Carson River. So it should be stored in a sediment retention basin constructed upstream of the road, because it's the only place we got, because the state owned that land downstream. Okay. Similar to the retention basin at Golden Eagle. Also, the retention basins must be cleaned out, obviously, after any significant storms, and that action will have to be financed on an annual basis as well. This action, I've made this note, has nothing to do with the state. Is that correct? This action of the retention basins, that's you. I think you intimated that this was going to be part of phase 2 or something like that. In terms of on the staging area itself, that's the main cause of sediment into that draw just east of the staging area.
Right.
No, there's no culvert there. It just takes the road out.
Yeah, so there's no plan right now for a detention basin. We did put in some check dams and some rockline ditches to try to, and some scarification and decommissioning to try to address some of the drainage into Golden Eagle Lane. I know that there was somebody had suggested that a year ago that the work we had done had caused more erosion onto Golden Eagle Lane, but we hadn't at that point done any
I
work.
think I suggested.
Okay, we actually, I'm sorry, but we actually hadn't done anything on the ground at that point.
Except clear.
No, we hadn't.
No?
We actually had not. We had not done any physical
clearance?
work
Okay.
to.
All right.
it-
So I was mistaken.
we didn't do any physical work until just in the last, actually the last few weeks, maybe the last 2-3 months.
Okay.
So we're hoping that some of the work that we have done and continue to do, what we've done right now is right in the staging area. We're going to continue working up the hill, and as we can divert more and more water higher up from reaching the staging area, then that should make an improvement as well. So I'm hoping that within the next year, with this next round of grant funding, that we can continue to address more and more of those issues and get some of that water to spread out into the areas where it can be absorbed and get it out of the channels.
It's on the west side of the road. I'm happy with that. I'm not here to grill you guys. The on the west side of the road, this ties in with that accident that someone had from the staging area. They were towing an OMV, and they took out the whole cluster of mailboxes at the corner. Did you see that? Yeah, it was, yeah, and that's just, the guys were going like bats out of hell. And they took out the whole structure. I mean, my mailbox ended up on the other side of the road. And it was, so, but to me, that's an education story along that section of road. And I think that you must mark that road as being 15 or something like that, because I've seen twice. I've had two occasions where people have come down. One when people have come down Golden Eagle in the rain on the 8th on the Sunday after the rains, and the 3 trucks, man, they just took everything out that they could. I mean, and they were local people, and probably we have more trouble from local people than the people that are coming in from out of town, because they're not happy with this concept that they're not allowed to drive in certain places. So I think that's my other point was on the west side of the road. Are we going to do anything about that? Or are we going to get the state to fix that up and get rid of those things that go off Golden Eagle and come on and go off and come on? Because that's where the guys drive like, they're crazy. And they keep on, they take the turnoff down past mailboxes, go on that rough road up and down, all the way up to just to where you intercept with Edmonds. So those two places are pretty tough to understand what we have to do about. I don't know if you guys can do anything.
And can I add another layer of complexity?
Yeah.
And you've heard this, Dave. But with Golden Eagle Lane, the complete west side and some of the east side is under state. It's not even under the city, not even the road. So it's outside of our project area as well as, in a sense, our jurisdiction.
That's the paved section.
The paved as well as the dirt on the west side between the road and the prison. Is that where you're talking about, between the road and the prison?
Well, I'm talking about higher up where I am living up there as well. But the road, the prison, that's the area I'm talking about right now. Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, no, so that's got complexities related to it being owned by, and you guys can do nothing about that. I understand that. Okay, so
We can talk with them.
We can. The other point is at the Golden Eagle open space. Now, my understanding is that people are not allowed to access that with motorized vehicles from the Golden Eagle side. They can only access it from the north side. Is that correct? Because I've got the Golden Eagle open space right next to my house, and in the open space language, it's inviting people to come and drive and park there. So I just need to understand they're not allowed to access that gold from the Golden Eagle place, Prison Hill, in OMVs. Well, if they are, they go all the way down private road.
I think
Or up the private.
we may want to
We'll
take
follow
some of
up
this
with
up
Dave
at
on
the
that.
staff level.
Okay, all right. Okay.
I can address that to some degree. So, we talked about boundary designation, and so part of what we're doing is that there have been a lot of incursions into residential areas on the east side of the OHV area. right? And we've had, that's been a topic of complaints from residents over there
Yeah,
for
the
some
east
time.
side, yeah.
On the east side, right. And so we are in the process of designating that boundary, and we do have plans to put in fencing, and we're actually essentially taking out some OHV area because it's very steep, it's very erosive, it's very dangerous, and people get down into those canyons and they can't get back out, and then they wind up going through private property. So we are addressing that with this
That's near
project.
Risky's house.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm talking about that little patch. Just, I'll discuss with you guys and let you go. The other thing, I need a new sign, just past the, past the staging area, that says no access for motorized vehicles beyond this point. Because you have the sign before they get to the staging area, but these kids that I caught, 3 of them, coming down and they parked in the staging area, and they said they didn't know, and they apologized and what have you. But they really, they were having fun. It's a difficult issue to deal with, OMVs and the environment. Okay, thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments? Sure.
Yeah, I'm Pete Donges. I'm a 4-year resident of Carson and also a Muscle Power board member, crew lead, hike lead, and trail coordinator. As you probably all know, Muscle Power has a long-term commitment to do trail building and maintenance on Prison Hill on the north side. And Paul Sinnott, who's sort of a zone and a crew lead for a lot of the work up there, uses the Coons Trailhead to let crews access the east and the west side of Prison Hill to get at build sites. Just this year, I think Paul finished about a 240-foot reroute of a part of the east side of the North Loop to get past some really nasty rock areas and to improve sustainability. Just maybe a month ago, he finished a 1,000-foot reroute on the northwest part of North Loop. And we're constantly taking tools, from Coons Lane Trailhead up to various build and maintenance sites. And I'd just like to advocate for alternative one, if it keeps our access to all of that work closer to the hill. We also run hikes with the hike group in Muscle Powered out of the Coons Trailhead and go off to West Loop and up onto the top and all along the top and so on. And I think it's a much prettier transition into natural terrain to use the existing trailhead than to retreat back to where alternative two shows that. So that's just my personal opinion, but it'd save us a lot of work and I think make for a nicer, prettier experience to keep the trailhead where it is. That's all.
Thank you.
If I might, I just wanted to add, I apologize, I neglected to give a shout out to Muscle Powered and Paul Sinnott on when I gave my updates on Prison Hill. And Paul has done a tremendous job realigning the North Loop. I recently rode it on my mountain bike, and it's a beautiful trail. And the work that Muscle Powered has done on Prison Hill over the years is phenomenal, and we couldn't have what we have up there without our partner in Muscle Powered. It's my thank you to them very, very sincerely.
Thank you. Muscle Power has been a long-term partner, and thank you for your email as well. Any other comments, public? Committee? Oh, I'm sorry. Please.
Yeah, my name's Dan Time, I'm a Carson City resident. And when they built the freeway, I was under the impression that the south pasture of the Silver Saddle Ranch was supposed to be wetland mitigation. Is anybody here aware of that?
Actually on the north side, you are correct, but the location is on the north side of Carson River Road, maybe across the road, where's the main entrance of Silver Saddle Ranch, so it's on the south side.
Well, I know they dug that pond there.
Yes.
Is that the wetland mitigation that they had
Yes.
proposed?
Yes.
Oh, was it at any time considered for the south pasture of the Silver Saddle Ranch? Because that
I
was my
don't-
initial impression.
I don't have that much history.
Oh,
I don't know.
okay. But anyway, it's a done
Mhm.
deal, whatever it is. Huh.
And probably about 5 years ago, I did join NDOT to go out to their mitigation wetlands to see if the three factors, the hydrology, the plants, and the soils, right, Joanne? Those three factors are being met for our typical wetlands. I didn't see the report, but I went out there with them to help.
Okay. So there are no further plans for the south pasture?
Not currently.
Okay. Oh, yeah, also too, I guess, as I'm on a roll, but, yeah, I've been running and hiking on Prison Hill for close to 30 years also. And my major issue with the off-road highway section is enforcement. I mean, no matter what you do, I mean, you know, there's always gonna be those that don't follow the rules. You know, and I personally have stopped many people out there from riding in closed areas. And most of the responses that I get are respectful, you know, pleading ignorance. But, I mean, they ride right past the signs. You know, I even had people tell me, oh, I thought a red slash through a motorcycle meant motorcycles were allowed. You know, I mean, I don't know. Good luck with keeping them out. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Committee? Okay, we'll go on to, excuse me. Our action item for tonight, possible action regarding open space advisory committee meeting schedule for 2020. Ann?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just keeping with the recent direction from the Board of Supervisors about having potentially 2 joint meetings with the Parks and Recreation Commission a year. The proposed meeting schedule for 2020 is in your packet for approval. Are there any questions?
Okay. Any questions or committee comments? All right. Yes, Margie?
I would like to thank staff and other members of the Open Space Advisory Committee to being flexible enough to put this meeting together when our joint meeting was canceled. Thank you all for that.
Thank you, Margie. Anything else? Public comment? Joanne?
On that note, I have to leave in about 15 minutes to pick up my son. But I was flexible in getting here.
All right. Seeing no public comment and hearing nothing else from committee, do we have a motion?
I'll move. I move to approve the Open Space Advisory Committee meeting schedule for calendar year 2020. I can't believe that.
I second.
Okay, we have motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, passes. Staff updates, discussion only. Jennifer, your director's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jennifer Budge, Parks and Recreation Director. Just a couple quick updates about vacant positions that we have available. With the retirement of our senior park planner, Vern Cron, we have done a title change and just some minor adjustments to the job description. It's now being called a Parks Project Manager, and that is open until December 26th. Also, we have a park ranger position open with the retirement of Alan Biddle. That's also open until the 26th. And then we have a park maintenance worker position open as one of our staff transferred over to the water department. So all those positions are open until the end of the month. We encourage you to apply or pass that on to anyone you know that might be interested.
Okay, thank you. Ann, activities, projects, and grants and open space properties. Lindsay, nice to see you.
Hello, nice to see you guys. For the record, Lindsay Boyer, Natural Resource Specialist for Carson City. You guys have in your packet both the updates for the Carson River area and also outside of the Carson River area. I'd be happy to answer any specific questions that you have, but related to the updates outside of the Carson River area, I just wanted to talk briefly about Kings Canyon Road. Oh, sorry. Oh, okay. So I guess just related to the Carson River area, I don't have any specific things to share. You guys have the updates, but if you have any questions, I can answer those. And then I'll have other updates for you.
Any questions for Lindsay?
I have a comment.
Yes, Margie.
I took it on myself to do a smidgy little bit of homework on the Silver Saddle Ranch. The protection, what's it? You have a really nice name for it. I want to use that. The stewardship plan. Since I work in the same building with the State Historic Preservation Office, SHPO, I went upstairs and rattled around a little bit. And I found out that the person assigned to that job has completed it, and it is now on the deputy administrator's desk. So she thought that we should have something very, very soon. Just so as y'all know.
Thank you
That's
for,
related to Silver Saddle? Great.
yeah, thank you for looking into that. We were wondering, so.
That's the stewardship plan.
Great. Okay, any other comments or questions for Carson River side of things? All right. Public comment? Nope. All right. 4B or 4C, non-Carson River open space areas.
Okay, so now I'm very excited to give you guys an update on Kings Canyon Road. I know that's been something that's been hanging out. So just at the beginning of this month, we presented to the Recreational Trails Program Committee for the grant that we applied for through them to fund the actual construction and repair of Kings Canyon Road. And that grant was fully funded and awarded to us. So we just have some Section 106 stuff to work out between the Forest Service. Related to that, a component of the OHV grant that was originally awarded to the Forest Service will be subgranted to Carson City so that we can complete that Section 106. And we're hoping that that can be completed perhaps by this spring, and then we can jump into implementation and construction this upcoming summer. So we're all very excited. That's been a long time coming. So please let me know if you have any questions related to that or anything else within this report.
Alan?
Is there a design for that road repair?
Yes, so the design component was completed by the Forest Service road engineer, and that was paid for through the OHV grant that was awarded to them. So that they're currently not quite at 100%. I think they're at 90% plans, and their goal was to have that wrapped up by the end of this year. But their grant that they're working off of was also extended, so they have a little wiggle room there.
Is there going to be any opportunity for additional parking at the trailhead?
That wasn't.
The upper trailhead, Kings Canyon, Ash Canyon.
Right. That wasn't incorporated in this particular repair plan. They were only focusing on the road prism. But potentially in the future, I know it's come up as a, potential capacity thing, so.
Yeah, I'm just concerned about kind of the safety of that because we get a lot more people driving up there and trying to park on the road that it could get pretty congested right there. I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of people wanting to drive up there to start the trail.
Sure. And I don't know if Greg can speak to if that's been thought about at all in the future. But like I said, it has been at least brought up as it relates to this project.
Thank you, Lindsay. Did you have something to say, Greg?
Well, I guess just a couple things. No, we haven't really talked about adding additional parking up higher on the road. We did meet with the new district ranger for the Forest Service the other day, and he suggested that we not allow trailers to go up beyond the paved portion where we're going to put the new parking lot in, because there won't be turnaround for trailers up above, even though they will now be able to access it. Also, hopefully, when we get the Lincoln bypass completed, there would be fewer people that would need to go up there to access that particular trailhead on the Ashley Kings. So they would be able to access the trailhead farther down, so that would prevent the need for additional parking up there. But yeah, I think down the road, we probably do need to look at that.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you.
Activities related to trail projects managed by Open Space.
Okay, if you
Are
haven't
there
heard
any we
enough,
haven't talked about?
if you haven't heard enough from me tonight. So I do have a couple of updates. Capel to Tahoe Trail and Lincoln Bypass. Unfortunately, we were not successful in obtaining recreational trails program grant for funding for that for this year. And in fact, Rec Trails, they did not fund new non-motorized trail construction this year, with the exception of one small connector trail in Washoe County. So we were not alone in not being able to get that grant. However, discussions before the meeting tonight, we were looking at some different possible options with, muscle powered and open space, maybe doing something to get the Lincoln Bypass trail completed this year. And so, well, maybe that should be an agenda item for, as Chairman Scott and I talked about earlier, maybe that could be an agenda item for the next meeting. Also, just wanted to mention Eagle candidate Ari Erickson. He did his project on the north end of Prison Hill. He placed the wayfinding signage for the trails. If any of you haven't seen those, hike the trails or ride them and check them out. He's got some nice signage up there. And there's some photos of our staff doing the reseeding on the north end of Prison Hill. You'll see our director, Jen, is in there. Let's see. Oh, and then we also had a Eagle project at Carson River Park. We leveled and repainted and put the monument sign and placed rocks around the base to cover up the crumbling base. Did a bunch of touch-ups there and replaced some of the interpretive signs. And I know that Vice Chair Welsh had asked about that at an earlier meeting. We found some replacement interpretive signs that BLM has sitting around, and we just stuck those in for now. So eventually we need to put in some updated signs, but at least we have some newer looking signs for a while. So, and that's, I think, all that I have. If there are any questions, let me know.
Thank you. Any questions of Greg? Any public comment?
Robin Orloff, you've all heard from me before. I wanted to thank Greg. I mean, I know I get passionate about Prison Hill, but I want to thank Greg and Open Space and everyone who's built all the trail system in town. I know you're working on many projects, and I've been on most of them, and at Greg's suggestion, I went on the Fifth Street trails, and it's just awesome. So I want to thank you. We have the kinks to work out with this. And I also want to say, I'm not totally, some of my best friends are OHVers. In fact, my husband has 6 dual sport motorcycles in our garage, with one more coming. So I got to tell you, maybe we won't be married for much longer. But I'm not totally unfamiliar or totally against OHV. I think there is definitely a place for it, and in our community as well. So I want to thank you all for listening and tolerating.
Thank you, Robin. Any other public comment? All right. Members' announcements and requests for information. Anything from the committee?
I'd just like to put on the record that the Historic Virginia and Truckee Trail has received another year's grant from the Rivers. I'm getting tired. Rivers Trails Conservation Assistance from the National Park Services for 2020. We have our first meeting with, and they actually hired somebody this year. So we've got an assistant to actually do the grant. So we have our first meeting with them for Thursday this week. So that's great.
Who is that? I'm sorry.
Her name, the new gal
No,
is
I mean, in terms of who got the grant.
Historic Virginian, well, Muscle Powered, who is our umbrella for the Historic Virginian Truckee Trail. Muscle Powered is serving as our umbrella nonprofit for the Historic Virginian Truckee Trail, but it's really the Historic V&T. So that's exciting that we got another year's grant for that, and we really plan on hitting the ground running this next year. We're going to have a logo in next month. So, and we're going to have some signs on trails here in Carson City. And I guess we're going to have another grant. We're going to go for a flap grant for another piece of trail, right, Greg? With Derek? Or Dirk? Is that what we decided?
We've been in discussions with Public Works on the next round of this next flap grant application, and that we're looking at maybe doing something with Ash Canyon and Ormsby. So yeah, that's a possibility.
And the Anderson Ranch development is promised, if they get approved and if it actually goes to fruition, to continue the V&T along their portion of Ormsby. So we're making some progress, at least in Carson City. Washoe, the other counties, we're still in process. But anyway, we do have that.
Thank you. Other member announcements or comments?
Just a quick question.
Jeremy?
Question for you, Greg. So, yeah, it sounds like we didn't get our grant for CAP to TRT. First, was Lincoln, the Lincoln bypass part of that ask? And then second, what's our plan B for this coming year to build that trail?
Okay, so first question, yes, Lincoln Bypass was part of that original ask. And Plan B is in the works. We're going to meet with Muscle Powered, and I'm sure that they want to and they will start volunteer construction as soon as we get the green light to go ahead with that. And then also, Chairman Scott and I had a brief conversation before the meeting, and we were talking about some possible options of maybe doing some potential funding for mechanized rough cut of Lincoln Bypass, and maybe that some funding could come from jointly from Open Space and from Muscle Powered. So those are things that we need to look at and talk about doing. But I think that our goal for this year will be to complete Lincoln Bypass. And then we'll go for a grant ask next year for Captain Tahoe.
Thanks.
Any other committee comments? Jennifer?
Mr. Chair, did you want to revisit the minutes after this item?
Certainly before we adjourn. Thank you. Any other member comments?
I have a question, but it's not about the minutes. Can I ask it real quick? Sure. I just want to ask about the homestead holidays, and can you give us a little recap on whether that was successful or not, or?
Sure, and I was thinking too, maybe when we get to future agenda items, maybe that a report on that could be at a future meeting, so you can get all the details. I did attend on Saturday night. It was very busy. Over 1,000 people attended on Saturday. There was about 250 on Friday. We had really bad weather, really high winds, rainy, kind of miserable. Last night was about 650 in attendance. So it was really well attended. People were having a great time. We got a lot of feedback actually at the public meeting, and earlier tonight, the workshop before, I got a lot of really positive comments from people. So I'll ask Dan Arp to come and do a report maybe at your next meeting with some more details.
We also have, if possible, could someone from Friends of Silver Saddle let us know their take on it?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. Any other comments from the committee? All right, let's go back to the minutes. We have the minutes that we received earlier this evening of October 21st.
Just go back and make sure it says what you said you said.
Do we have any action on those minutes?
I was absent. Member Evans, I was absent at that meeting, and the roll shows that.
Cop out.
Okay, do we have a motion regarding the minutes?
Sure, I move to approve the minutes from Monday, October 21st.
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? Been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes of October 21st. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, future agenda items. Don't forget the possibility of considering the Lincoln Trail participation as a potential agenda item for us in next year's budget. Anything else from staff?
Summary of homestead holidays.
Yeah, the summary from Parks and Rec folks. Okay, anything else? Yes, Margie.
I don't know if it's an agenda item or just something that could be sent out to open space members, because I worked until 5 o'clock today and I didn't get to hear hardly any of the comments from people on the 90% design of the trails of the trail project. And I would like to hear more about what people thought of it and what the final consensus was on that. Thank you.
Are you talking about our meeting or the public open house?
The public open house.
Okay, because I think we got quite a few comments that were passed out and sent some earlier today, email type.
I've read all of that. I've read that, I've tried to review all of this. I just thought there might have been more comments than this and the email that Ann sent out. If not,
Okay,
there's
I don't know if
for
they were
anything.
documented, I guess is where I don't know that
Okay.
anybody was keeping further notes, but if there are,
Okay.
please forward them. Okay,
Chairman, well, a follow-up to Margie's question. So we did hand out comment forms, and I don't know if any of the staff received any back. I guess Lindsay has some, and we also gave people the option to email me or to mail them in. So we can follow up with whatever comments we received.
okay. Any final public comments?
Robin Orloff, we're talking about future agenda items, and I don't know, in the packet tonight, we saw maps of the proposals, I guess, for the Prison Hill area. Are we going to be having an agenda item to discuss those at some point? The new maps, what's going to be, what trails will be put in and when? Or has that already been discussed and decided?
Are you talking about the Kuntz Lane area that Greg mentioned, or are you talking about the OHV?
The OHV area.
Mr. Chair, would you like me to work with you on how to address that for the future?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess Greg may be more familiar with where that process is. We've not had, I guess you announced we have another grant this year for some.
Yes, so we have grant funding for this year. We are still finishing up the project, the 2019 project, which is a layout and design, and then pursuant to getting SHPO approval, we would like to start construction in 2020. And so I guess we'll take direction from the committee on what you want to see from us as far as the concept designs. We showed the most recent concept tonight, just briefly. It wasn't, we didn't talk about it in any detail, but if you would like to see that as an agenda item for next time, I can certainly present what we've got and what, more detail on what our plans are for the coming year.
If it might be just as well to have sort of a progress report, in terms of the backup. I don't know that we're in a position where we would have a lot of, it would be in a position to comment on from our perspective. I mean, typically we're kept in the loop, but we're not the designers. So.
Certainly, and that's why we have partnered with the professionals, because staff don't have the expertise for doing the layout design of OHV area. And Novak comes very, very highly respected, and so we're relying on them to do this for us. And they have, in their process, they have spoken with a lot of people, both OHV users and non-OHV users, on the ground and in meetings, and they've made design changes based on comments from all user groups, and they continue to do so, and they continue to revise and update their plans. So we will certainly have an agenda item next time to, at least for an update.
Robin, did you talk to these people that did the design?
Yes.
Okay.
I have. I guess I'm just confused as to who makes the final decision as to what design is going to go forward. Who approves that final design?
Did they offer you more than one alternative? Greg, is there more than one alternative to the design?
We're not laying out alternative designs.
Right, so there's one design.
But there's one design, and it is based on, and like I said, has been revised and changed based on public comment.
Sorry to jump in. We're on future agenda items. I just want to be careful with the back and forth in the conversation. I think it might be good if we put something on the next agenda, and we can do that, and we can definitely follow up with Robin on where we're at and alternatives.
I would appreciate that. We've been going back and forth, but maybe we.
And I think we certainly would encourage the folks to have public meetings and reach out, in terms of the community, besides anything here. We're not really equipped to do a lot of detailed design review, but rather, we hope that they'll reach out for that input as you suggested, Greg. So.
Got one comment.
Jeremy.
So just one suggestion that I can see is, it seems like the point of contention that Robin really wants to hammer home here is that she's concerned about, this is what I understood from your comments, about the free ride areas. And if we could have maps, maybe some photos. I swear I recall seeing a map, but I was going through my previous documents and I couldn't find a map that showed the free ride areas. I seem to recall that the discussion briefly a long time ago about the free ride areas was that they were in rock. They were not in vegetated soil areas, but apparently that's not the case. So maybe in the discussion of the status report, there needs to just be a subsection that just specifically discusses the free ride areas.
Certainly, we'll do for next time.
And could you also provide a discussion on the methods or treatments used for erosion control or just sediment capture or treatment? I know you brought up detention basins, and we don't have any proposed, and maybe we don't need them, but what is being proposed? I'd like a little more clarification or mapping of what that is.
I'll provide that.
Okay, any other public comment?
Apologize.
See ya. Hi, Kathy.
Thank you. Hi. I'm Kathy Sylvia. I'm on the board of the Friends of the Silver Saddle Ranch. We just want to thank the Open Space staff and Advisory Committee, and a special thanks to Ann for the hard work you put in developing the management plan for the Silver Saddle Ranch. Our board includes experts, you guys probably know this, in cultural and historic preservation, as well as wildlife biologists and avid birders who have been involved in the ranch since 2001. We wanted to let you know that we are a resource available and willing to assist at the ranch. And we would be happy to send somebody for a recap of the homestead holidays. I was there Friday night and all day and evening Saturday, and it was not only cold, but a madhouse. So, and I thought it was very well attended, but we would be happy to send somebody with so we haven't had a board meeting, but when is the next meeting? Oh, good, because our board meeting's in January, so we'll come up with somebody to give you a comment. Anyway, thank you. I just wanted to thank all of the open space people. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Kathy. And thanks, Silver Saddle. Pass that on if you would. Okay, any other public comment? It's almost the bewitching hour. Do we have any final comments from staff or from committee? We have a motion to adjourn, or is it like the minutes?
I'm here. I move to adjourn.
All right, the meeting's adjourned. Thank you.